Just literally, there's value in having 4 guys just having worked alongside each other for 4 years before they go out into the real world. I think you had a quote from Plato to back that up. I would say incubation things like the accelerator programs have a similar role. They just put like-minded people beside each other in a similar environment, and they're there. So I do think they are kind of important.
Okay, perfect. So like they play an important relational or interactive role, building up long-term relations and community networks, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm curious, from a personal perspective, you're in a startup. You've previously worked in another startup. You've gone through various accelerators, incubators. How do you deal with the inherent risk in technology startups?
Well, like, I mean, when you say risk, you mean like the risk of the whole business going under, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
To be honest, yeah, that's like, I was under no illusions, right, coming into it. So for me personally, just the way that the approach I took was, yes, the company in a few years could very well just go under. And how I expected that to happen was just there'd be a loss of enthusiasm at some point, and someone would say, like one of the founders would go, look, I'm actually going to just step aside, just drop, I recently saw a Twitter message from basically one of our competitors, just basically announced that last week or something. I'm just going to be stepping down. That's exactly how I'd imagine it. So I always kind of thought that not only was it like a possibility, it was a sort of an inevitability that I was more likely to fail, or the company was more likely to fail than it was to succeed. And so given that like you could end up just failing, then your kind of mind kind of goes to, well, if that is going to be the outcome, failure, then what can I achieve in the meantime? Do you know what I mean? You can go back to that college analogy. There are your exams at the end of college, but then also spending time with 4 guys during that time is still valuable. So maybe the degree isn't everything at the end. Maybe, you can learn something along that way. So yeah, I think, even if it does explode or you see it as a complete failure, there are still things you can gain out of it, right?
Okay.
And one of the good things you can really get out of it is to understand how things work, that understanding, which you can only get in a startup, because you can't join a company like Google and get an instinct for how this started. Do you know?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
There's no, another way of looking at it is if you talk to a doctor in college spends, I think something like 8 months studying embryology, right? Over their 6-year degree in total. The number of doctors who actually deal with embryos is less than 1%. So why do all doctors spend so much time studying embryos? And the answer is because a lot of questions about the human body can be explained about this growth stage,
Yeah.
So a lot, understanding the way things are is kind of understanding how they came to be, and only a startup, I think, can offer that unique perspective, So that's how I would deal with failure, or the inevitable perception of failure that you have in startups, is that there is something still valuable to be gained. And, one of the things I was hoping that I could gain, for instance, was become a really good published iOS developer. I would have, I'd be a published iOS app. I'd have a few of them made. And then if I had to go into another interview, I could tell them about the things I did in Loyal App and the things I built.
Yeah. Okay. That's actually fantastic. Thank you. So thinking about your actual work, and when you're in the thick of it, I'm just curious about the when. So do you work from a central workplace, or do you find yourself working from different locations?
So the actual team, like I said, is about 16 people.
Yeah.
I would say close to half of that is usually at any given time working in a remote capacity.
Okay.
So we have a few like Brazilian developers. They're working. Some of them come into the office, and some of them just live in Brazil. So they obviously never come into the office. So they're just entirely remote. Me personally, I like coming into the office. I like having that separation between my home and my work. I do know some of the other developers that work remotely, like Dan. He would have been employee number 4 in the company. He lives at home with his wife and his kid, or his girlfriend, and he only comes up maybe once a week, or or maybe twice a week at the most. And then he works at home all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm senior enough in a position that I can actually make that decision. I could go. I'm working 3 days at home. But I prefer to come into the office. I prefer that division.
Okay, perfect. And I suppose similar, but in relation to time, do you work a regular 9 to 5, or is your work more flexible or more dispersed?
We are flexible about the hours we allow people to work, so they can generally show up whatever time they want. And this generally means between 8 o'clock and 12 o'clock, we'll say, during the day. And then they just obviously they go home. Part of that flexi time though is that we think it's a little bit stupid to have it as a default requirement. Everyone has to be in the office at 9 o'clock. The reason is simple. It's because it'll just add 20 minutes onto everyone's commute time if you have to be there for 9 o'clock. But you change that time to 10 or 11 o'clock, suddenly they can get into the office a lot quicker, and it's just so there is that flexibility we would offer. But at the same time, I think that there have been a couple of guys who just started showing up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the day, and we did just say to them, guys, just make it more like 12, and less like 3 o'clock, But they have just been, light conversations, and the guys have fallen into line pretty quick.
Okay, perfect. And what specific skills or expert knowledge do you need in order to get your job done?
For me, I'd be the iOS developer. So I'd have a number of roles in the company. I'd be wear many hats kind of guy. But the role I'm technically paid for is iOS developer. So I have to make the Apple apps, the native Apple apps. We have a few of them, and and those development skills, you'd need to know Objective-C, you'd need to know Swift, you'd need to know the Cocoa framework, you'd have to know your way around Xcode, as well as a few other kind of quirks and gotchas that are just for Apple development in general, like code signing and stuff like that, that wouldn't be mirrored on the Android side, or even general on back-end or front-end web development in general. So there'd be a couple of things there. I'd say they'd be the general skills. There'd be other peripheral skills that wouldn't be unique that you'd be expected to have. Git would be a good example. Most developers, I think, would be expected to have a little bit of version control knowledge. It doesn't have to be Git. It could be Mercurial or something else, but generally, yes. I would say, in Intercom, another company, they have what they refer to as T-shaped developers. And T-shaped developers are generally good generalists. They have a general jack of all trades knowledge, and then one strong specialty, is what they generally look for. And I'd say we'd have a similar approach in Loyal App that we have. Most people would be good generalists with a strong specialty.
Okay, perfect. And so you named loads of different scripts, different bits of technology there. How do you manage to keep all of these skills up to date? I know that there's always updates, renewals, new features.
There'd be a few newsletters that I would keep subscribed to. So things like that, like industry kind of paper. So the first would be newsletters, right? So there'd be a couple of dedicated ones. They're just niche enough for me, without being too niche or too generalized. There's a guy called Dave Verwer who does one. Then there'd be community participation in communities like Reddit and stuff. Would have subreddits for that sort of stuff. where you'd have just thousands of people discussing, what they're doing. Maybe as an alternative to Reddit would be